Hey everybody, this is Kennedy Hawk from the MCM team, and this video is something that I talked about with a few people on the Solo Champions League Discord server, and it's titled, So You Want to Take on Ronan. And what we're going to talk about in this brief video are different ways that you can tackle the end game ultimate boss monster that is Ronan in the game of Marvel Champions. So let's take a deep dive into Ronan and the matchup in the current round of the Solo Champions League, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So Ronan is one of the most grueling villains in Marvel Champions. He has several encounter cards that when you flip them up, if this is the first time you're playing him, you're going to say, that's not fair. That's not fair. I wrote that's no fair because I was so in shock reading some of his encounter cards again. You aren't wrong. His cards are not fair. At the end of the day, he's still just a big pile of really big numbers and surges that relentlessly throws attacks and scheme activations at you. And we have a lot of new tools since Galaxy's Most Wanted came out that can help stop him. So today's brief video is going to go over some of those tools to take on Ronan and some of the highlights of his kit and things to remember. We're aiming to take down Ronan in the Solo Champions League Season 10 Round 5 matchup. If you haven't played in the Solo Champions League before, pause this video, go to the little description of the video, and there's a link to the website for signing up for the Solo Champions League and how to get onto their Discord server. It's a super fun league that can now have like teamwork, alliances, and things like that, where every like 2-ish weeks there's a new scenario posted, and you're given the choice of either picking a hero within a certain set to play with a specific aspect, or picking an aspect to be paired with a specific hero to take on this challenge. And they're done in like sets of 5 games, so Season 10 has 5 rounds. They kind of get more difficult as the rounds go on, so this is the end-all boss of Season 10 in Round 5. And you can even join in at any time. There's no penalty for joining in late. You would just like only do the mission that's currently available and then future missions, and you can still see how you rank up against other players. There's a bunch of things you compete for within this, so you're trying to defeat the villain as fast as possible. You're trying to have as much health on your board as you can between you and your allies. You're trying to have as few of minions and threats on the schemes as you can have. We're going to go into a little bit of that, but for now we're just going to talk about how do we beat Ronan, because the most important thing you can do is win the game, and that's how you're going to get good scores in the Solo Champions League. All right, so with that said, let's talk about Ronan. So Ronan has 3 villain stages. In this setup, we're going up against Expert Ronan, but even in Standard, Ronan is pretty brutal. He starts at 14 hit points, goes up to 18, and then 25. 25, that's insane. So he jumps by 4 and then jumps by 7. He has toughness in all 3 forms, and in all 3 forms he has the ability, when Ronan activates against you, give him 1 additional boost card if you control the Power Stone. So he's going to get double boosted against the Power Stone. And in the setup for the current Solo Champions League, there's very few cards that have 1 or less boost icons. So you're really going to be counting on him typically boosting for 2. So he's hitting pretty beefy. He's got 2 scheme and 2 attack in the first stage, but don't worry, he's going to have more than that. And then he jumps up to a 2-3, and then a 3-4. So in the most expert of expert modes, he jumps up in both stats, which is one of the hardest jumps these villains can take on a transition. For Stage 2 and Stage 3 villains, each one of them pulls out a side scheme. So in Stage 2, you're going to start with Cut the Power, which is a Crisis side scheme in play. In Stage 3, he's going to bring out Superior Tactics, which basically pulls the Power Stone to him. And it can't be unattached until you get rid of this side scheme, which turns out isn't as bad as you might think. So those are the villain stages. We're going to be talking today about how to defeat Stage 2 and Stage 3, going through those 2. But all of these rules and lessons also apply to going in Standard mode against Stage 1 and Stage 2. So, main schemes, what do they look like? We're going to start by having the Kree command ship environment in play, and we'll look at that in a minute, and the Milano support. So we're going to have the ship command modular set mixed in. It comes with all the nasty things we know it comes with, like Rogue Vessel. We are also going to attach the Power Stone to the first player, but in the Solo Champions League specifically, the Power Stone is going to be attached to Ronan. So I'm going to talk today as if Ronan is starting with the Power Stone. This scheme, main scheme 1, pops at 7 per player. It starts at 2 per player, and it goes up 2 per player per round. So in 4 player, this is getting 8 threat thrown on it around, and your Justice player has to overcome that 8 threat and still help make progress on any side schemes and work on a villain with you. So it is very difficult to maintain. If you let this pop, I won't say your game is over, but your game is a lot harder. You attach the Power Stone to Ronan. If it was already attached to him, he gets a boost card, which it probably was because he's winning the game at that point. And he does Take What Is Mine. While the Power Stone is attached to Ronan, threat cannot be removed from this scheme. Starts at 1 per player, still goes up by 2, and at this point you have to play Tug of War with the stone just to stay in the game and remove threat. And it becomes very difficult because someone needs to swing at Ronan basically every round, deal 3 damage to him to take the Power Stone. Then you can remove threat, and it can have like a very big sequencing nightmare if the wrong person has an attack event or is in alter ego form. So really in 1 to 2 players, if this first scheme stage pops, you're pretty much done. I'm not going to say you should scoop. You should always play it out and see how it goes, but it's going to be pretty close to scooping. In 3 players, maybe you can survive it, but it becomes really a sequencing nightmare. So really, you just don't want this first scheme to pop if you can help it at all. So that's my first sort of mini tip for you. Don't let main scheme 1 pop. Don't let them place threat. That's bad. Pro tips from Kennedy Hawk. All right, so initial setup for Ronan. You're going to be starting an Expert Road on Ronan Stage 2. He's going to have 18 hit points with Tough. He's going to have the Power Stone in play, which is a 1 scheme thwart 1 attack upgrade that basically sits on Ronan, and when a hero deals 3 or more damage to the villain with an attack, it'll move to that hero. And then when Ronan deals 3 or more damage to that hero with an attack, he'll steal it back, and it'll be kind of a tug of war. But really, that means he's a 3/4. But it doesn't stop there. He also starts with the Universal Weapon in play. The Universal Weapon gives Ronan the Accuser Stalwart. At least I believe he starts with it in play. Let me verify. Attach the Universal Weapon to Ronan. Bummer. Yeah. So he's going to start with the Universal Weapon in play. So that's going to bump him up to 4 scheme, 5 attack at the opening. It does have the hero action to take 2 damage, deal yourself an encounter card, to shuffle this card into the deck. And that's going to be really important. We'll talk about that later. So Ronan's basically starting as a 4/5 with 18 health and Tough. He's also got a side scheme in play, Cut the Power, which is 3 with a Crisis, 2 threat on the main scheme, and a Kree Command Ship, which is a permanent hazard icon that you will have to deal with for the rest of the game. It has the text, First Player Interrupt. When a Treachery card is revealed from the encounter deck, exhaust the Milano and spend 1 resource of any type to cancel that card's when revealed effects. So, to deal with all of these bonuses that the villain has started with, you have the Milano. Good luck. I say that jokingly because you want to use the Milano for resources. It's a really cool card mechanic to start everybody with this bonus resource, and you'll get to use it in the first round. But there's the first player action here to remove threat with the Milano. You're going to use that anytime it's ready, basically. And there's also this Kree Command Ship, so if you make it through the villain phase without seeing a Treachery card that ends your game, and you haven't used the Milano, then maybe you can use it for threat. And if you already had the threat under control, then maybe you can use it as a resource if a ship command card didn't come out and exhaust it already. So the Milano does not make up for all of this. You're going to have to do that with your expert and skilled playing. And now let's get into how do we do that. So pro tip number 0 from Kennedy Hawk, giving you a free tip before I even start counting. Play a strong hero. Ronan is hard. Like, Ronan beats the pants off of me. I have probably played 100 games against Ronan at this point, and I've only won maybe 25 to 30% of them, solo games. So, obviously, you should be listening to my advice, because I don't even have a very good win rate against him. But I do have a lot of experience losing, and I learned a lot of things from those losses. And one of the things I learned is not to be ashamed of playing a really strong hero against a really strong villain. Or if you're not playing in the Solo Champions League, to swap out a mod set for an easier mod set. In Solo Champions League, we're specifically told to play with Power Drain, the Electro one, so we'll be stuck with that. Luckily, we're specifically told to play with Doctor Strange. So a lot of this video is going to focus on some of the things you can do with Doctor Strange to help you against Ronan, but also some other heroes as well. So don't hold yourself back. Use a strong hero, and you will not regret it. You'll still have a hard time, don't worry. All right, tip number 1, I like to say, and this is specifically for solo, but sometimes in multiplayer as well. Don't take the stone from Ronan. Like, if you can avoid doing 3 damage from your hero in sources of more than 3, then do it. because you do not want that Power Stone if you can avoid it. It is nice to have the stat buff, but Ronan's going to get an extra boost card against you, and in solo that means every activation Ronan's going to get an extra boost card until he rips it back from you. There's also 2 copies of this Treachery card, Single-Minded Fury. When revealed, Ronan the Accuser attacks the player who controls the Power Stone, even if that player is in Alter Ego form. So that's right, he's going to attack you with 2 boost cards in Alter Ego form. If he's got his weapon out, not the Power Stone, because you have it, he might be at 4 attack. If he gets 2 boosts, he's just hit you for 8 in Alter Ego form, and you're probably dead, or close to dead if you didn't just recover. So there's one tip. If you do go to Alter Ego form, which I highly recommend against, recover before you sit there, because Single-Minded Fury exists and can kick your butt. So just don't take the stone. Do other sources of damage. Ally damage isn't going to trigger the stone. Non-attack events or non-attack damage sources like energy daggers for Black Panther. I mean, it's really piddly-dink damage, or Yarnbjorn ping damage. It'll add up over time, and you can still take the stone sometimes, but what I would say is when you take the stone, make sure you have a good reason for it. Make sure you have a bunch of readies in your hand and you can get a lot of use out of that +1 attack or +1 thwart. Or make sure you have a ton of attacks in your hand, so you're going to dump 5 attacks on him or 4 attacks on him, and then he's going to take it back and he can hold on to it for a while you recover and get your board state back in control. So look for non-attack damage sources to help you push damage onto Ronan without taking the stone. Make him drop his weapon immediately. Ronan's biggest threat are his stats, because he starts at a 4-5. If you can make him drop the weapon, you've just dropped him to a 3-4. If you decide to ignore tip number 1 and take the stone, you can drop him down to a 2-3. That's still a hard villain, so you can't afford to let him keep this on him. The main reason you can't is because of Stalwart. Stalwart stops him from being able to be stunned or confused, and you need to stun or confuse him. His biggest threat are his stats, so if we can stop those activations, those stats become useless to him, and we take that and put the power in our hands. So note, you will have to take the 2 damage here. You can't absorb that with a tough to pay the cost. You have to resolve everything on the left to be able to get the things on the right. And note, it doesn't discard when you get rid of the weapon like a normal attachment does. It gets shuffled into the deck. And that brings us to tip number 3. Make his weapon stay gone forever. Don't let it come out again. And I say that because this weapon is obnoxious. If you have him stunned and confused, and he activates and clears stunned, and you're like, oh, I'm going to flip next turn, and he gets this universal weapon, it's going to drop off confused. So you need to make sure it doesn't come out. And there's a couple ways you can do that. There's real easy ways if it's a boost card, so I would say every deck you're making for this Solo Champions League, include 2 copies of Target Acquired, because you want to be able to find it fast, and you want to replace it if you ever use it. Because that can stop this from coming out on boost. If this comes out on boost, it's like a 1 boost icon. He might also drop a status condition or ruin your next turn. So you really want to cancel that and get it in the discard pile, and then leave things in the discard pile for as long as possible. You can also use cards like Defiance that cancel the boost card, but it cancels it before you flip it face up. So you really have to get lucky into canceling the universal weapon. But that being said, if you have 3 copies of Defiance and you cancel it for 3 activations in a row, as long as you're playing Defiance and preventing it from boost, then it has to come out as an encounter card. Likewise, you can do this with Wraith. You can put him out there in Justice and leave him on the board. You can also use things like Spycraft to cancel this as an encounter card. Now, you might draw into something worse with Spycraft, so I know some people don't like that, but it is an option to get rid of the universal weapon and then keep it gone forever. All right, tip number 4, you need to have a plan for Fanaticism. I'll be honest with everybody. Fanaticism is a bad card. It is a bad card that should not exist. It's so horrible for players. It comes out, it surges and gives you another card. In solo, you're going to get 2 counters put onto this, and then whenever Ronan attacks you, he's going to gain Overkill and Piercing, and at the end of the attack, you're going to remove 1 Fury counter, so he's going to get 2 attacks with Overkill, Piercing, and +1. You would much rather see this as a boost card than anything else. There's nothing is going to feel better than that first activation. When he flips this as a boost, you're going to say, man, this could be a 7-icon boost card, and I wouldn't even care right now. This card will haunt your dreams. It makes it so all of our typical ways to stop attacks other than just straight up defending don't work. It removes tough. It attacks over allies with Overkill, and it boosts his attack to make it even hard to defend. So you need to have a plan for getting rid of Fanaticism, and I want to spend some time on that. There's a lot of ways you can do it, And the most popular way that I know of, at least what we call it on Discord, is the ally Sleaze. And since we're playing Doctor Strange, we're going to have 7 Rings of Ragador. And here's how the ally Sleaze works. What a piercing attack does is when someone is attacked, or a character is attacked, and the villain has piercing, or a minion has piercing, if someone defends, that defender becomes the target of the attack, basically, right? So if you defend with an ally, piercing is going to check that ally for a tough card and remove it. Then it's going to deal damage to that ally, and yes, that damage has overkill. So if I block, a 7 damage attack with Ironheart, I'm taking 5 to the face. But it removes the tough from the ally, not from the ally and your hero when it has overkill. Overkill is just extra ability damage from the attack. So your tough card on Doctor Strange can absorb that overkill. So you can still bring allies to 1 HP and chump block them with them. You just need to make sure you have tough on Doctor Strange to make that work. So you can do that with 7 Rings of Ragador. If you're playing a Guardians character, not in Soul Champions League for this round, you can use Shake It Off to take some damage, and then put a tough card on yourself for the next attack. You can even use Muster Courage, because Doctor Strange is an Avenger, and other characters are Avengers, so this ally Sleaze is normally you put tough on your ally and try to block with them twice. Can't do that once Fanaticism comes out. So when you're using your 7 Rings of Ragador, make sure one of your toughs goes on Doctor Strange. The other 2 can go on allies. You might as well not waste them, but you're going to want to make sure Doctor Strange takes one of those tough cards. All right. Tip number 2 is hero tech. So this is less for Doctor Strange and more for other characters. There's some really good hero cards that reduce damage from an attack to 0. I'm looking at Shield Block. I'm looking at Backflip. You only have to absorb 2 of these Fanaticism counters. Or if you're really lucky, and I can't remember if there's 2 copies of Fanaticism or not. I'm having a brain for it now. There might be 2 copies of Fanaticism. It's that horrible. I can't remember. But if you're really lucky, you'll be able to shield block one turn and then shield block again the next turn because there's 2 copies of shield block and backflip. Likewise, Wiggle Room with Miss Marvel, you can exhaust her and bounce that back to your hand to absorb 6 damage and draw 2 cards. And that gets rid of one of those Fanaticism counters. You've only got to get rid of 1 per player plus 1 extra one. So if everybody's running a hero that has these damage avoiding cards, as soon as Fanaticism flips, everybody needs to look for this card of theirs and hold on to it so that they can stop and absorb one of those Fanaticism counters. And I have to give a shout out to the #1 most MVP hero of all, Mockingbird. Not Hawkeye. I mean, it's in Hawkeye's kit, but it's all about the Mockingbird. Mockingbird is the best ally for shutting down Fanaticism. So every time Hawkeye takes an attack, because he has to initiate it against you, you can spend a resource to bounce Mockingbird to your hand. It doesn't matter what they get off those boost icons, that entire attack is absorbed, and then you can play her again. So if you're playing a solo game, you can just absorb 2 counters of Fanaticism 2 turns in a row with Mockingbird and replay her and make only a little bit of progress on your board unless you already had some setup going. But at that point, you've eliminated one of the worst cards in the game and you feel really good about it. So big shout out to Mockingbird, Hawkeye MVP. Okay. Moving on. There are a lot of basic and aspect cards that you can tech to help you with this. So I'm thinking of cards like Vision. When Vision enters play, you can choose a card, basically, to blank its text box until the end of the round. So that's going to eliminate Fanaticism for a round. Now, you're not going to remove counters from it, but it's going to give you a round to find a solution. And that's the spoiler card from the Hand of Thanos podcast for the Ironheart pack. So if you're in Australia and you already have Vivian, first of all, super jealous. Second of all, play Vivian. She's good. In protection, we've got Subdue and Defiance. So you can use Defiance to cancel the boost cards. That way you know how much damage you're taking. So you can make an intelligible decision of, should I defend? Can I have an ally soak this damage and not have too much of it hit me? Likewise, especially in Solo Champions League, you don't want to ruin your tempo by exhausting Strange to defend. So you'd rather play Subdue, right? It costs you only 1 extra card on top of the card itself, and you give the attack -3 attack. So that's going to put his attack into a reasonable range, right? Even if he's got his weapon and the Power Stone, his 5 becomes a 2. Even if he boosts for 3, you're now only taking 5 damage, which is still a lot of damage. I guess 6 with Fanaticism, but it's not kill you every time it sees you damage. So I really like Subdue for this. It lets you keep Strange ready to use his invocations and stuff like that. I like Spycraft to cancel this card when it shows up. You also get to cancel the Surge effect, which is nice because you cancel the entire encounter card. You do reveal another encounter card, so it basically surges. But it doesn't surge and reveal another encounter card. So Spycraft, really good. And I like Lockjaw for this, right? Because you need something, especially in solo, that's repeatable, that helps you stop this big attack. So what I'll do is I'll just spam 4 resources to put Lockjaw on the board. I'll let him soak the attack because it's going to subtract 4 from the attack, and very little will get through to Strange or whoever is your hero. And then the next turn, you could just play Lockjaw again and have him defend the next attack because he'll be in your discard pile. And that tends to work pretty well. So those are some of the cards I use to counteract Fanaticism. All right, tip number 5, Flippin Guidelines. I love Marvel Champions because I love flipping my hero. Do not flip your hero against Ronan in Standard or in Solo. Just it's not going to end well. Something will happen that will ruin your day. So he's putting out 2 threat per player already. And he has 4 scheme when he starts if you haven't removed his weapon or the Power Stone. So even if he only gets a 1 icon boost card, he's flipping that first scheme with 1 scheme activation in Solo. In 2-player, I would still tell you not to flip without a Confuse. Because even if you have him confused, there's a good chance you'll get an advance or an extra activation, which will still add that extra threat, which would be annoying. And even in 3-player, I'm going to give you the same advice. In 4-player, I would say it might be okay to occasionally flip 1 character, but not every round, because the threat just piles up so fast at 2 per player. In 4-player, if you're placing 8 threat on that scheme per round, whoever is doing the thwarting has to get rid of that 8 threat, and if you let 1 scheme activation go through at 4 scheme and he gets a 2 boost icon, now they have to deal with 14 threat to keep relative progress, and that's just not a tractable level of threat for you to deal with. So flipping down is just basically not an option. Anything that's an alter ego action, you're basically going to try to ignore it. You can take a risk with Confused, but I'll tell you, in the test games I've done, every time I have flipped with Confused, and this is anecdotal, I've drawn an advance. So I wouldn't bank on it. I'd rather keep those Confuses on Ronan for when he draws an advance that would ruin my game. All right, Ronan has a zillion extra activations, and maybe it's not really a zillion, but it's 10. 10 extra activation treachery cards. Just let that sink in for a minute. That's insane-o. So this is one of the reasons I say don't take that Power Stone, because you can cut it down to 8 right away, and that helps a lot. But he's got 5 extra scheme activations, 3 of them only scheme if you're in alter ego form, and then he's got 6 extra attack activations. So he is going to be making double attacks. These are the cards you're probably going to use the ability on the Kree ship to cancel, because it's not sustainable to take 2 to 3 villain attacks from Ronan a turn. You could take 2 a couple times, but you can't do it forever. So there's a lot of extra activations. You need to plan for them. You need to know they're there. And what I like to do is know how many are in the discard pile, right? If I see all of the You Stand Accused and Assaults are gone, then I'm feeling pretty good. But if I am on turn 3 and I look through the discard pile and I see all 10 of those are still in the deck, you can bet I'm sweating my pants off, because those extra activations can be real painful. So I don't have a lot of solutions for you other than save your Kree ship ability and your Milano spending for these. Because these are the cards that are really going to end your game when you're not prepared. All right, here's talk about something that you can do proactively to help you. You get to decide when the villain progresses from stage 2 to stage 3, or stage 1 to stage 2 in standard. So use that to your advantage. You know that a side scheme is going to come out at each of these stages, and you can know what it does ahead of time. So make sure to use that and say, okay, well, I can't flip to stage 2 Ronan right now because he's going to get a crisis side scheme, and that's going to end my game. Likewise, if you have the Power Stone and you need to keep it, you shouldn't flip him to stage 3 because the side scheme that sucks the Power Stone away from you is going to come up. Also, Ronan in stage 3 has retaliate, which we didn't talk about earlier, but that's game-changing as well. Another reason to not use attack damage is you're going to be taking a ton of damage from retaliate. Allies are going to be flying off the board because so much damage is coming at them. So only push him in a stage when you're ready to handle those stats, and when you're ready to handle the side scheme, and when you're ready to handle retaliate. So there's a lot of caveats to when you should decide to flip him, but since you get to decide that as the player, use it to your advantage. All right, I'm going to say this, and it might not be true for everybody, but this is my experience. Do not play a building deck against Ronan, or a controlling building deck. I haven't done my WinCon videos yet. It's on my short list of the different ways that you can win Marvel Champions, but one of the ways you can win is by trying to control the villain and build your board state until you have some ultimate weapon down and you can take the villain down. That doesn't work against Ronan. With the number of extra activation treacheries he has, and a permanent hazard, and the 2 threat per player, Ronan is just inevitably, eventually going to overwhelm the player. Even if you're spamming statuses and doing everything right, with all those extra encounter cards, something bad's going to happen. So don't try to build your board too much. Don't plan on playing Avengers Mansion and Helicarrier and Quinn Carrier. I've done some test games because I'm doing basic for this round of Solo Champions League. And even with all the extra card draw from Strange and Power on All of Us, when I try to build all those supports up and build my board, I always get blown out. Ronan has a lot of health, but if you can build your board a little bit at a time with little 1 cost, 2 cost, maybe 3 cost cards that help you out, and you can put a little bit of pressure onto Ronan, just putting a little bit of damage on a turn, it's going to build up over time, and eventually you're going to have the board state where you can do that bursting. But don't build your board state with these big 3, 4, 5 cost cards, because it's really going to set you back, and it's really going to cause you to not be preparing in the way you need to handle a Ronan villain phase. So I would encourage you to take a more tempo style where you do a little bit of building, but you also try to push a little bit of damage each round so you get yourself closer to your win con, because then you feel like you're making progress, and feelings are important. But also, you are making progress, and eventually you'll get to that point where you can burn them down. All right, so those are my main tips. I know they're not super helpful. They're as helpful as I can be in the games I've played against Ronan, but I wanted to give some specific tips for Solo Champions League Season 10.5. So these are tips specific to Doctor Strange, but some of them might work with other characters. So first of all, let's look at some strange things. You've got your 5 invocations, and normally Vapors of Valtor is the worst one. But don't forget, both stages 2 and 3 of Ronan start with toughness. So you can turn that toughness into a stun, but you have to remember to remove his universal weapon to get rid of Stalwart first. So don't be discouraged when you shuffle your invocation deck and you see Vapors of Valtor. It can actually be pretty useful against Ronan. Alright, Images of Icon and the Crimson Bands of Sturdak. These are not attacks or thwarts, so they get around Retaliate and Guard. So you can throw Crimson Bands at him all day in Stage 3 and you're not taking Retaliate damage. You're also not taking the Power Stone, which is good based on the advice I give at least. And even if you are stunned or confused, you can still play these. So there's some market cards you have the options for in Solo Champions League, and there's one where you can deal some damage to yourself to stun the villain, and you stun yourself. So if you do that one turn, and then next turn play Crimson Bands, you don't even have to clear stunned off Strange, because you don't plan on ever attacking. So it's not really a cost like they want it to be on that card. Alright, 7 Rings of Ragador. Don't forget to give Strange one of the toughs. Don't play the ally way where you put it out on 3 allies, because eventually Fanaticism is going to come out and just piercing that tough and overkill into you. So put 1 tough counter on Doctor Strange at all times, and then push them out to some allies. I even had in a couple of my games, I realized that the 7 Rings of Ragador, you can put tough, you just put it on characters. It doesn't say friendly characters. So I had some games where 7 Rings of Ragador was the 4th card in my invocation deck, and I would put tough onto Ronan, knowing Vapors of Valtor was next. And then you can use Vapors of Valtor to turn that into a confused or a stunned. So don't discount that combo, because once you get your Cloak of Levitation out and you can ready, that can be a really cool 2-card invocation combo. Alright, Winds of Watum, Master of Mystic Arts. I felt like I had to put it on there. This is just money. Do it every time you do it. So basically, if Winds of Watum is on the top of your invocation deck, you pay 1 with Master of Mystic Arts, so really you're paying 2 to draw 3 cards, and then you can exhaust Strange and draw 3 more cards, and then hopefully you have something that's going to do a status or slow Ronan down. Alright, almost never play these. Magical enhancements, it's just not worth it. You're not using your base stats to do enough to care for that. And Sanctum Sanctorum, again, never flip down. If you get stuck having to play Sanctum Sanctorum, I guess I missed a slide in here. I would recommend shuffling in the Protective Ward, because that's the card that you're going to want to shuffle in and then draw into it. Because if you could spend the 2 resources to cancel things with that and save the Milano to remove threat, that's going to be really efficient for you as a player. Alright, Wong is really good. Don't get me wrong. Wong was like MVP in Strange decks for a long time for helping you get the right invocation on top of your deck. Cosmo is just a better Wong. Basically, you can name event on the top of the invocation deck. You already see what it is, and then you discard it. Cosmo doesn't take any consequential damage, and it lets you cycle your invocation deck. So you definitely want to include Cosmo in just about every deck you play with Doctor Strange at this point. In Solo Champions League, Wong can still be worth it, because that healing can add up and help you sustain a good hero score, but ultimately Cosmo is just a better play right now for Doctor Strange. Alright, so for protection players, here are some cards that I would recommend. Subdue and Defiance we already talked about. Iron Fist is really good. That's actually an interrupt, not a response on him. They've errated it. So when Iron Fist attacks, he can push that initial toughness off. Then he can deal 2 to Ronan and stun him. Now remember, you got to get rid of the universal weapon, but having 2 stuns on a stick for the turns you need them can be really good. So I like to put Iron Fist on the board, let him sit there until I need the stun, and then use it. And then Ever Vigilant. That's really good once you get your cape out. You basically have 3 readies now, and one of them removes threat from the main scheme to help you out. So it's a really good protection card. Justice players, there are a ton of side schemes, and you know 2 of them are coming out from Stage 2 and Stage 3 villains. So Skilled Investigator, very good. Wraith or Wrath, however you say that, you want to cancel those boost abilities on the universal weapon, so good to get rid of. Clear the area, you're going to have to keep the threat on the main scheme pretty low, like it pops at 7, so you can get a lot of card draw off of Clear the Area. And again, Spycraft can cancel universal weapon, it can cancel Fanaticism and all those bad things, so really good, but remember there's that spy character requirement. Alright, for aggression players, I put Hulk. Do not attack with Hulk. Hulk is there to absorb a Fanaticism hit. It's one of the best ways to absorb it because he's got 5 HP. So that's going to absorb all of Ronan's base stats and you only take damage from the boost card, which isn't too bad. I put in Press the Advantage and Magic Tech because you're going to be throwing a lot of statuses on to Ronan. That being said, remember that in Stage 3 he has Retaliate. So Press the Advantage now becomes pay 1 to deal 2 damage to the villain, draw a card, and take a damage back, which is not nearly as good. I also really like the wild resources in all the aspects, but specifically in aggression, I like Audacity because it's another way to push non-attack damage onto Ronan when you're just playing your invocations. So you're already going to be throwing like basically the 25 back cards to your deck could almost just be blank cards. Audacity is just a better version of a blank card, so definitely include it in aggression decks. All right, for leadership, obviously we've got our card draw. We've got our White Tiger that's going to draw us 2 to 3 cards. Slightly better than Maria Hill, but costs a little bit more in solo. And then we've got Kalu. Kalu's really good for fishing up Master of the Mystic Arts, so you can do a double Windsor of Tomb or something like that. U.S. Agent, sort of for the same reason as Hulk, he's probably not going to survive more than 1 attack, but he can soak a big beefy attack if Fanaticism comes out, and Summoning Spell, because allies are good. Alright, basic cards. We talked about Vivian from Ironheart's pack. Target acquired, very essential. Lockjaw, Cosmo. We talked about both of those. Lockjaw, again, is another big Fanaticism blocker. Way less efficient than U.S. Agent, and even more less efficient than Hulk, but he's repeatable. So that is a big thing we want for Fanaticism. And Cosmo, because Doctor Strange, Cosmo, yeah, they belong together. Alright, and in the Soul Champions League, you also get to spend some units from the Galaxy's Most Wanted Market deck. And here are some of the favorite cards that I have tested out. I really like the combo of these first 2 cards. When a boost card is turned face up, cancel that card's boost ability and all of its boost icons and draw a card. So it's always going to replace itself. You're really going to love when this cancels Universal Weapon or when this cancels something else horrible like a 2 or 3 icon card. We have In Defiance. When an identity would take any amount of damage from an attack, prevent 2 of that damage and then draw a card. You're going to take damage almost every villain phase unless you're really getting lucky with your allies and Fanaticism draws. So this can be like a really good card to let you absorb one of those Fanaticism attacks, maybe with Strange's defense, and then cancel out some of the damage. Take the fight to them. This card is way better in multiplayer, but in solo, it's still really good. Look at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck. You can discard those Fanaticisms and Universal Weapons, place the rest on top or bottom of the deck in any order. So I usually put them on top if I can handle what they are. And if there's something really bad, I'll discard them. And sometimes I put them on the bottom because knowing how many cards are left in the deck, you can kind of know what's coming up at the end. So you get to use that knowledge again later, if that makes sense. And then there is a 0-cost Grapple. It has a unit cost of 2. Deal 1 damage to an enemy and stun it. Great for removing Tough and stunning the villain round 1 if you remove the Universal Weapon. You do stun your hero and draw a card. But again, with Strange, you can play your Crimson Bands of Sidorak as many times as you want when stunned. And I prefer this one a little bit more than the Confuse one because I don't plan on flipping down, but I do plan on taking a lot of attacks in hero form. That being said, there's a Confusion one that does almost the same thing, but confuses your hero and confuses the villain, so consider that one as well. And those are my favorite market cards in the range we're talking about for the Solo Champions League. So with that, all I have to tell you left at this point is good luck and have fun. Let me know what decks and tricks you use the most against Ronan, and join the Solo Champions League or MCM Discord servers. and discuss more about this difficult challenge and more about the Solo Champions League. It's a really fun group building activity. Also, a shout out to Road to Nowhere, the podcast. It's a podcast by two really good community members that talk specifically about the Solo Champions League. They kind of review the stats after each round and maybe do some primers for the next round to help people get prepared, sort of like this. So big shout out to them. Really love their podcast and show and their engagement, and have fun, hopefully defeating Ronan. If you do take down Ronan, please take a screenshot and email it to me at marvelchampionsmonthly@gmail.com so that I can make a, beautiful video of everyone's screenshots of Ronan being defeated as the heroes celebrate, as we should. So, with that, I wish you luck, and we will see how everybody does here in 2 weeks.